Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. As I mentioned yesterday, the draft is almost here, although I kept getting the date wrong. I thought it was today for some reason, but it turns out it's tomorrow. Or at least I think it's tomorrow. We'll see. But more and more trades are coming in the NHL. Today we got the biggest one yet. Pierre-Luc Dubois was traded from the Winnipeg Jets to the Los Angeles Kings. The full trade package is that Pierre-Luc Dubois alone is going to the LA Kings in exchange for Alex Iafallo, Gabriel Vilardi, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 second round pick. That is a lot. And honestly, in my opinion, this is excessive. Pierre-Luc Dubois then signed an 8-year, $68 million extension, which averages to $8.5 million a year. That's actually not that bad. It sounds like a lot, but when you look at it, Jeff Skinner is making more than him. And guys like Mikhail Sergachev are making just as much, although so is Leon Draisaitl. So it's tough to say exactly where people are, but I don't think it was an overpay from that perspective. I think it was an overpay, the fact that they sent that much back to Winnipeg for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Because when you actually look at it, Pierre-Luc Dubois was only the third best forward on the Winnipeg Jets this past season. Scheifele scored 40 goals. That puts him above. And Kyle Connor led the team in points. Both of those players had better seasons than Pierre-Luc Dubois, no question. Which means that Luc Dubois is sitting here in third, although he is young and has plenty of potential and was a former second overall pick. But even still, this seems slightly excessive, given that Gabriel Vilardi, who was a 2017 first round pick, is just starting to break out and turn into quite the good player. Rasmus Kupari hasn't done that much yet, but he was a 2018 first round pick, and I'm sure he'll turn into a superstar someday as well. Alex Iafallo was an undrafted free agent, if I recall correctly, and is still a solid player. Even though I don't think he'll ever become a superstar, he is a solid depth player for the Los Angeles Kings. Which means they just traded away 3 good offensive players for Pierre-Luc Dubois. The weirdest thing being, in my opinion, they don't even need Pierre-Luc Dubois. Their offense was fine. They had some good players with an aging Anze Kopitar, newly acquired from a year ago at least, Kevin Fiala, who dealt with injuries this past season, but I think will break out into a superstar. Adrian Kempe, who's getting better every single year, as well as the fact that they had the guys mentioned prior, as well as some prospects looking to make the jump to the NHL, such as Alex Turcotte, the former 5th overall pick in 2019, and Quinton Byfield, the 2nd overall pick in 2020. So this Kings team has a pretty good offense and is looking to build it up even more. So why the heck did they go and trade away a couple good players for Pierre-Luc Dubois? I don't think it was worth it. I don't think Pierre-Luc Dubois is that amazing of a player. I don't think he's awful. I think he's a pretty good player. I just don't think he's the superstar everyone's made him out to be. Now, don't get me wrong. He's young. He does have the potential to break out into a superstar. He could do what Matthew Tkachuk did, and he was only the 2nd best player on his team last year. Although he wasn't bad, he wasn't amazing. But then this past season, he turned into an absolute superstar, becoming one of the best players in the NHL. And that could happen, potentially, with Luc Dubois. But I don't know. It's not proven. And for all you know, that could happen with someone like Gabriel Vilardi or Rasmus Kupari. You don't know. So I think this is a slight overpay. I think the biggest need for the Kings is defense, given that they don't have anyone on defense aside from Drew Doughty, and Vladislav Gavrikov isn't bad. They're looking for Brandon Clark to make the full-time NHL jump. But as I talked about yesterday with Sean Durzi getting traded, they desperately still need some second-line defensemen right now because Sean Durzi's gone. You don't know what Brent Clark's going to do, which means you have no proven depth defenseman right now. So they still need that, and they also desperately need a goalie. More importantly, given that Eunice Crispolo is not coming back, even though he isn't a bad option, I don't think he's a superstar. They should have made a trade for goalie. If they're going to make one trade with Winnipeg, it should have been for Connor Hellebuck, because he is a true superstar goalie, and that's what the Kings need to get better. I don't think Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to have that big of an impact on this team. Meanwhile, the Jets, Pierre-Luc Dubois clearly didn't want to play for the Jets. He wasn't going to play his hardest, and he wasn't going to be re-signing for them. So, makes sense to trade him away, and they got a pretty solid return. Again, this sort of reminds me of the Matthew Tkachuk trade, because, same thing, he didn't want to play for Calgary anymore, so they shipped him out and got a great return. I thought that trade was lopsided at the time. Obviously, it ended up turning out for Florida and hasn't so much for Calgary yet. But, who knows? In no time, Jonathan Huberdeau could return to his former form, and then this trade will be all evened out. And I think this similar thing could happen here. Speaking of the Flames, Tyler Toffoli, who is arguably the Flames' best player all around this past season, was traded to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for Yegor Sharangovic, and I am sorry if I butchered that name so badly, and a third-round pick. This trade is interesting because we weren't exactly sure what the Flames were going to do. They had a great season a couple seasons back, and then this past season, they completely went through a change of scenery. All of their superstars, except for Tyler Toffoli pretty much, were new, including Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, and Nazem Kadri. And they didn't turn out so well. The Flames flopped badly this past season. So it's going to be interesting to see. Will the Flames try and build it up again and make the playoffs? They still have some good players. Or will they just try and retool and compete in a couple more years? And it's looking like right now that they're leaning towards retool and compete in a couple more years, because they just trade away one of their better players. Now, this was a good time to trade him, because he just finished coming off a really good season, and he's a free agent in 2024, which means that it makes sense to trade him if he wasn't going to re-sign with the team. But at the same time, if you're the Calgary Flames and you think you can compete next year, then it would have made more sense to keep him on your roster so that you can compete in a better fashion. But the fact that they trade him away is almost symbolizing maybe they don't think they can compete. So maybe Noah Hanifin will be next. Maybe Elias Lindholm will be next. Maybe even Nazem Kadri will be next out the door for the Calgary Flames. We'll have to see. But it's not looking like the Flames are leaning towards making the playoffs this next year. Meanwhile, for the Devils, this trade is pretty obvious. They are a good team. They are looking to make the playoffs again. They came from nowhere this year, turned into a superstar, and now they're looking to do that again, but maybe even better, maybe even go further in the playoffs this time. So, they're trading for more offensive skill players. I think this is a good fit for the Devils. I like the fact that they're bringing in another forward for that team, although I do think they're still lacking on defense, and they do need a goalie this offseason. But I think Tyler Toffoli and his cheap cap hit is a pretty good start. Lastly, speaking of the Devils, literally, Mackenzie Blackwood was traded from the New Jersey Devils to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a 6th-round pick. This trade is pretty simple. Mackenzie Blackwood was not working out in New Jersey, which means that they had to trade him. They had to let him go, because he just was not performing. He was a former 2nd-round pick. He's expected to be their future net, and he had one season where he looked like it, but he's just gone downhill from there. Which means that makes sense to trade him and see what you can get from him. Meanwhile, the Sharks, James Reimer, who was their starting goalie on and off this past year, who was a solid goalie, is going into free agency and is not re-signing with the team. We know that already. He's in his mid-30s, and the Sharks aren't anywhere close to competing. Meanwhile, the team he goes on to could. So that leaves them with Kaapo Kähkönen, who looks like he could be a good option, but so far, when placed under the spotlight, he just hasn't performed for the Sharks. Which means why not bring in a bit more cheap competition for him? And maybe have two goalies. If they're lucky, one of them turns into a superstar. If not, turn to the draft next year and go grab someone in the first round so that when you're competing 5 years down the road, that you have a solid young goalie. That's pretty much it for now. The draft, as I mentioned, is tomorrow, and free agency, I believe, starts on Saturday, which means that we are likely to get even more trades coming up very soon. But for now, thanks for watching.